if I may, I will introduce myself very shortly. I am a fashion technician and manufacturer in Italy. And so my job is basically about following projects with fashion brands. So that's basically the collection. And I follow up all the supply chain from the prototyping to the production. What I do every day is pattern making and researching materials, doing prototypes, doing fittings, and so on. At the same time, I am an editor for Dress the Change, which is a platform for education and information. We aim to provide consumers useful tools and tips about fashion and sustainable fashion, most specifically. So we do not address companies, but we try to show a perspective on fashion that can be useful to common people. So let me start with the presentation. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So, well, garment labels is actually quite an underrated topic. So I asked myself, why should we be caring about labels? Most of us are probably studying or working in fashion, so we have to know something about textiles, materials, and clothes in general. But we have to acknowledge that labels are still a very big and wide channel to for communication between fashion brands and consumers. So it's the most common and easy way to get information about garments for everyone. It can also help us understand how to take care of our favorite clothes. And labels always reflect fashion companies' practices. So we can see many choices that fashion brands make about their clothes if we start reading labels very carefully. In general, we have three different information in labels. The first one, and the biggest one actually, is composition. And it's about the fibers that are used to make a garment. It's about the raw material. It's not about the kind of fabric. So you will never find a label with 100% velvet or 100% lace, but you will instead find the actual fiber. The composition is that. So we have to know that composition labels are often filled with half-truth, and that's because of the different regulations in each country, which allows a percentage of fibers that are not mandatory. So we have never the complete information about the composition of a garment. For example, in Italy and actually in the whole European Union, we have an allowance of 7% of other fibers that can be contained in the garment, but we do not know about that. And also trimmings, buttons, sewing threads, zippers, and so on are not indicated in the labels. So besides that, when we start reading composition labels, we acknowledge what fibers are used, but what do we know actually about materials? Reading the labels, it's just the first step. The second information is about origin, so where the garment was produced, partially or entirely. That also depends very much on the regulation of each country or each part of the world. It's not mandatory in the European Union, so brands are not, they don't have to indicate the origin. And why is that? That's because origin could lead to some sort of discrimination based on where the garment was made. So to avoid that and to keep the market the most free, the European Committee decided to make it not binding. Another concept that it's very important for the matter of origin is the substantial transformation. So let's imagine the supply chain as a sort of stair made of a few big steps. So the substantial transformation is one of these steps. And in Italy, for example, to have the label made in Italy, you have to complete just 2 of the 4 principal steps in Italy. The rest can be made abroad, and you can still label the product made in Italy. So that's actually a very big issue, and we should think about this in order to consider, does the origin say something about the actual quality of the garment, or is it just a myth? So the third part is about care. So how to refresh, how to keep clean the clothes, how to wash, dry, and iron them. It's usually made of pictograms. There are no written parts. They are not binding. You don't have to actually write how to wash, dry, and iron. Also, they indicate the safest way to clean the garment. So it's not the only way or the most efficient, but it's just the safest one. And also, clean services always stick to this label. It's defined by law. They have to stick to it. So also we have to know that it's always standardized. So if I have a few garments all made of cotton, regardless of the kind of trimmings, the kind of embellishments that I have on that garment, the care part will be the same. But actually we know that in practical, it's not like that. So we also have to take that in consideration. So you can find here some sort of anatomy of the label. I also pointed out what information are mandatory in which countries. As you see, the USA are the most rigid and complete about the regulation. And as for UK and also Europe in general, we just have the composition that is compulsory. Everything else is up to the label, up to the brand, sorry, to write on the labels. And that opens up the matter of transparency. So let's discuss it. Since most of the information are optional, the choice of writing something on the labels is the direct reflection of what kind of business a brand has established. Of course, labels are not the only interface between the customer and the brand, so we should not look for transparency just in garment labels. But also, as we said, labels are still a pretty wide and consistent channel. It's a very big platform. It reaches everyone. So it's really a choice from the company. We have a few examples here. On the left, you can find a garment label with a certification, a logo of a certification. In that case, it's always useful to look for a certain kind of certification. So if we find a logo, we should ask ourselves, what does that mean? Because a certification, it's not enough to define completely a material or a garment. So some sort of certifications are about just the fibers. Some others are about fair labor and fair manufacturing. So there is no certification that contains them all. We always have to look for what does that mean. On the right side, we have a typical fast fashion label. They are always pretty big with several pages. And why is that? Because fashion companies need to report many production codes based on a very long supply chain. So many manufacturers are processing the garment, and each one of them needs to report their own codes. And also, the bigger the market, the higher is the number of translations and labels, of course. So that's basically the reason. And we also can see label from a sustainable brand. As you can read, they have decided to write everything, every small detail about the production on the label. And transparency is actually about that, because you may see that not all of these voices are like organic this, organic that, natural fibers, and so on. No, we can find also polyester, we can find a few countries in East Asia, and so on. So it's not about bragging, it's about just telling the consumer everything we may have to know, everything we want to know about the garment. So moving on, that's another example of the reflection of the choices of a brand. So many brands decide to suggest cutting off the label. It's pretty simple, also because labels are always itchy. So it looks like an innocent suggestion, but actually the consumer loses all the information, and labels become a waste, a very small and polluting waste. So why fashion companies suggest to remove the labels? Well, I think that the reason is mostly because it's easier and more convenient to have a non-informed consumer that otherwise. So that's basically the reason. And speaking of textile labels as products, so the actual textile of the garment labels, they need to be resistant unless we want them to become a waste. So they should be made of synthetics. Recycled synthetic could be a very valid option, or maybe organic and natural fibers that are actually harder to get printed, but they have an easier and quicker degradation. So we find sustainability in that. Speaking of the future of garment labels, what information will be featured? It depends on the market, actually. So we may will be seeing that luxury brands will continue developing solutions to protect themselves from fakes. So they will be defending authenticity, and they will probably try new forms of storytelling, and the labels may be part of it. So they will be making a leverage on empathy and personality. But that will be just about storytelling. It won't be about actual sustainability or interest in educating the consumer. As for globalized fast fashion brands, they will keep up with the sustainability issue, including partially and strategically a bit more information about the production. We are already seeing it. That's what I said before. Some sort of information are there just to brag about a facade of sustainability. So I think that really fast fashion brands will continue on that path. Speaking of the other brands, maybe small businesses, it will be easier for them to see the label as a chance to educate the customer and fully inform about the garment supply chain, because small businesses are most of the times more dynamic. They have a lighter structure, so they can adjust very easily. And also the quest of transparency will build will build the trust and engagement of the public. So it's really something that small businesses can do easy, more than all the other labels and brands. If there will be a universal grading system for clothing, well, it sounds pretty unlikely because of all the differences between regulation, which reflect a variety of different approaches to the clothing production. So as we have seen in the first part, it's really difficult to imagine that fashion companies will gather to decide a universal grading system. First of all, because they're not actually interested in that. It's not something marketable. And second of all, it's really, really a hard job because of the many different regulations and also supply chains. What about the digital innovation to help reporting information about the garment? This is already happening partially thanks to technologies like QR codes and fabric scanners like FiberSort. I've read about it on an article in Fashion Revolution. There is this fabric scanner that allows to detect the actual fibers contained in the fabric. So it's used to check all the labels from fashion brands, and that's very useful. QR codes, we have seen them already in the labels, in a few garment labels of some fashion brands. And this solution actually leads to a problem with accessibility, because if we think about our smartphones, yeah, we always have them, but what if we don't have an internet connection? What if we have a dead battery? Or what if we are elder and we do not have a smartphone, or we are not wealthy enough to have one? So I think that this kind of technology solution will never completely replace the actual textile label. A very manageable solution is to print directly on the backside of the fabric all the information that are usually written on the labels. That it's not very convenient for globalized and fast fashion brands because it's an obstacle for the production. They have to wait for the fabric panel to come back printed. So that's actually an obstacle. It's easier to just attach a label. And so that's why it's not very widely used. What can we do as students to make a change? We students and young people in general are by definition the future of fashion. So it's our duty to get the most informed about the field we will work in and never passively accept things as they are. So basically that's what we are making here. We are just trying to find a few answers about how fashion works. And how it works in many different places and contexts. Why is transparency in the fashion industry important in aiding a positive change? Well, transparency is the key to allow people to be aware of how clothing is made. We have seen it in the very first moment, as I said. So it's a very wide channel. So we have to be very careful about it. We have to also try to talk to people about that. And also transparency helps the consumer to develop a perception of fashion that it's outside the stereotype, the myth of a frivolous and dazzling field, which is something that I fight to every day. So that really speaks to me. And also that's also the reason why I'm so passionate about it, and I want to talk about it so much. So yeah, that was quite a lot. Thank you for listening. So I think I am ready to talk to you if you want, if you have any sort of questions.
Thank you, Andrea. That was really interesting.
Thanks to you.
I personally have a question that I was hoping you could answer. A lot of students at Northumbria do start up their own brands whilst they're studying. So when producing your first garments, with the aim of them being as transparent and ethical as possible, what would be the best starting point to ensure important information is on the labels?
Well, I think that we have the chance to investigate actually all the sources of the materials we use. So as students and also as entrepreneurs, we have to think about whatever material we used, we have to ask the producers where was it made or how was it made. We never have to settle for anything but the truth about it. And maybe when we do not know something, we just state it. Okay, I don't know actually where the fabric or the trimmings were made, but I know these other things. So transparency is actually about that. And if we start doing it since we are students, or maybe since we are, beginners in the fashion industry, we can generate a change also in the companies we will work for, or in general in the fashion industry.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Does anybody else have any questions that they want to pop in the chat, or to quickly pop on the microphone and ask Andrea whilst he's here?
I saw that somebody wrote something in the chat section.
Yeah, hi, Andrea. I popped my question in the chat there, but I'll just read it out for everyone. I said that you previously mentioned how fast fashion brands will put a facade on of sustainability through their labeling. And with that in mind, do you think that it will actually ever be financially viable for fast fashion brands to become sustainable?
Well, fast fashion, we don't have to think about fast fashion as just a shop. It's not a shop, it's a business model. So it's not really possible to completely have the sustainability issue meeting the fast fashion business model. So it's really difficult, in fact, to find a way to make it financially viable. But I think we have to continue ask for a change. I mean, because fast fashion as a business model can change a lot, because it has so many channels, so many opportunities, and so many resources, that it's possible that a change can be made in that. It won't be just about the financial part. It won't be just about the price, because of course they will have to reconsider all the profit and also the sourcing of materials and the whole supply chain. But that can be made if the largest base of consumers ask for it. So it's our responsibility as customers, as final users, to ask for it. So when I see some sort of movements that suggest to boycott fast fashion, yeah, that's a way, but we have to think that we cannot completely remove fast fashion as a business model from the world. So it's not really something that could happen overnight. So we have to really continue asking for changes also in the pricing system, also in the shop system, in the retailing, we have seen in the last year that many fast fashion companies are closing a big quantity of retailers. So I think that a change is going to happen, but maybe it's going to be a little bit too slow.
Yeah.
So we'll see about that.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
One more, Andrea. How did you get into looking into labels and partnering with Dress the Change? How did you start working with them?
Well, actually, it started from my discomfort, from my personal discomfort working in fashion. So I had to start doing something because, as I said in the first question, we always have to ask ourselves the right questions. So I was really in discomfort working in the fashion industry, and I decided to look for a platform that could help me have a voice and that could help me, asking myself the right questions. So I found Dress the Change, which is an Italian platform. So we basically address Italian people, but we are trying to, spread the word also to everybody. So I started to write for them. They were also very interested in a perspective inside the fashion industry. So most of the times I write about materials, I write about issues in the production or the supply chain or the workers' rights. So we are in the Fashion Revolution week right now, so that's very important to talk about that also. And I'm really engaged personally because I'm a manufacturer. So I just think about why am I lucky working in Italy? What's the difference between me and another worker in Bangladesh or in India? So yeah, that's how it happened. I was very, deluded by the fashion industry, and so I had to do something.
And just so anyone who doesn't know, Fashion Revolution is a group of people who were formed after the Rana Plaza factory collapse. And this year is the 8th anniversary of that. So that's Revolution Week, that's what Andrea is talking about. So if you'd like to get involved and sort of learn a bit more about that, you can go over to either Dress the Change's Instagram and see what they're doing with this week, Fashion Revolution Week, or the Fashion Revolution Instagram pages as well, because there's a lot of information on there. Is there any last minute questions at all before we sign off this evening?
Well, I see that there's a question in the box, but partially I already answered that.
Yes.
Well, about labels, I just want to say that it's really, it's completely underrated, but it's very important, and I have seen it working in manufacturing. So, you just have to trust me if I say so, but that's really something we should investigate.
No, it's definitely a very interesting topic that I think doesn't immediately come to mind when we talk about ethical fashion and sustainability. So we'll be sure to make sure that we spread the word and we start talking more about it.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for coming along, Andrea. It's been lovely talking to you and learning more about labels and what you do.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming along.